We've been gauging the reaction and analyzing this all morning long. Let's turn now to Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Thank you so much for being with us.
Congresswoman, thanks for being with us. Last time we talked, we discussed how patient progressives had been throughout this entire process. That patience didn't pay off yesterday. What's your reaction?
Well, I think what Senator Manchin did yesterday represents such an egregious breach of the trust of the president. And it's also, this is exactly why it's an outcome that we had warned about well over a month ago, about needing to plan a contingency plan for it. It's why we insisted on having the bipartisan infrastructure plan coupled and passed together with the Build Back Better Act. But I think right now we are at a juncture where it's not really about, I think, being angry. I mean, of course, we have every right to be furious with Joe Manchin, but it's really up to leadership in the Democratic Party who, made the decision to get us to this juncture and how we're going to move forward. And I think right now that Democratic leadership has a very large number of tools at their disposal, the president particularly, and it's really about time that, we take the kid gloves off and we start using them to govern for working families in this country.
Well, Congresswoman, you said yesterday that you were not upset with Joe Manchin as much as you were with Democratic leaders. And let's, as my grandmother from Dalton, Georgia, used to say, let's just take the rag off the churn. That starts with the President of the United States, doesn't it? He's the one who shook hands with Joe Manchin. They said they had an agreement on a $1.75 trillion bill, and the president told you all that you could trust him. He could bring Joe Manchin along. How do you work with the White House moving forward?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, when we were in negotiations, originally the entire country's infrastructure plan was in one bill. And this bill could be passed with all Democratic votes. It was a decision to separate these two bills and just break apart one part which was this quote unquote bipartisan infrastructure plan that has a lot of fossil fuel subsidy giveaways, of which Manchin is a known ally of the fossil fuel industry, and then separate the extension of child tax credits, separate the real actions that are going to protect us from climate change into the Build Back Better Act. Now, when that decision to separate and to advance the bipartisan infrastructure bill happened, some of us took umbrage with that. And the president did say that the that the Build Back Better Act was promised, and that, he's got it. And we said, with respect to the president, no one can really promise a Manchin vote. And so we need to really figure out what the solution is, because at the end of the day, when the clock strikes midnight on New Year's, we are talking about millions of families in the United States having their child tax credits expire. The president made the announcement just this past week that he does not have an intention on extending the student loan deadline. And both of these things, in addition to the untenable situation of voting rights in this country, all three of these things are completely unacceptable. And so what we really need to do is, I think, is have folks that really, our leadership needs to step up. And I think that we can do that. I do not believe that the situation is beyond repair, but it's going to take a different kind of thinking to get out of it than it did to get into it.
Not beyond repair, then what do you and members of your caucus plan to do in the coming days? What are the options on the table?
Well, I do think that there are quite a few things that have been going on in the Senate. You, Joe, having served in the House, you know how they turn the screws on the House of Representatives. They will have us voting late. They will make your life very tough. And I must say that, folks sometimes jokingly call Senate private school for a reason. We are treating the Senate, just the fact that you can go on Fox News and say, I don't feel like voting for this, or I don't think I'm going to do it. Having that not schedule a vote. The idea that that would happen in the House of Representatives is unheard of. And I think what's extremely important is that we really need to start creating an environment of pressure, very similar to the filibuster, where now you don't even need to talk to engage a filibuster, but you just need to threaten it. But we really need to create a governing environment in the United States Senate, make it tough, don't go on vacation, come back, call the vote, have to stand in front of your constituents and say, no, I'm going to take dollars, I'm going to take the food out of your kids' mouths, make him take that vote. They made us take the vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It was a tough vote. It wasn't easy. And you know, we have to stop giving people get out of jail free cards. Enough. And it's really about time that we start to get serious about governing, as well as leaning on the president's executive authority, which I do not believe has been used to the fullest extent that the American people deserve.
Yeah, and Congresswoman, we always refer to the Senate as the House of Lords. And you're exactly right.
Yes.
They would say openly, the House doesn't matter. And we would often act like that when, of course, the House matters every bit as much as the United States Senate.
Not only that, Joe.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, not only that, Joe, but not only is it the House just as important, the House right now, arguably, is one of the only federal democratically elected governing majorities that we have left. The Senate notoriously is designed for lower populations to have more power than larger populations. The presidency is determined by the Electoral College, and we are simply lucky that this time the majority of voters lined up with the Electoral College determination. The House of Representatives, and that's even with the asterisk of gerrymandering, is the only majority that most reliably delivers the actual will of the majority of people and voters in the United States of America. So that is why they call this the People's House. And when folks say that, this has nothing to do, you don't know the voters there, the voters here, it is extremely difficult to hold together a House majority. And, especially with the razor-thin margin that we have around this agenda. So the idea that Joe Manchin says he can't explain this back home to his people is a farce. I mean, it's a farce in terms of, plain democracy, because I represent more or just as many or more people than Joe Manchin does, perhaps more. But secondly, and importantly, is that if you can't explain to your constituents why the child tax credit that they are getting right now to help feed their kids in a time of record high prices should not be extended, that doesn't seem like a problem with his constituents. That seems like a problem with his ability to either communicate or really, I think there's a different reason behind this vote.
Well, you bring up a great point about the Senate and about the fact that at times, and I'm not pointing fingers at Chuck Schumer, but I just think the Senate as an institution is designed for members to protect members. And a great example is we have been talking for 6 months, about 6 months, about how Ted Cruz has stopped nominations for ambassadorships of people working at the State Department, et cetera, et cetera. Well, actually, when Chuck Schumer was allowed to and members agreed to do it, they just went to the floor. And Chuck Schumer said, we're going to stay here through Christmas. And we're going, we've got 41 ambassadors. We're going to get through whether you guys like it or not. And suddenly, boom, Ted Cruz is trying to compromise. He's trying to strike a middle ground. And they get through. And
absolutely. And I mean, this idea that, again, over time has switched from a talking filibuster to now just being able to stand up and posture and make a threat. God forbid that they might actually have to show up and stand or sit and actually have to talk and actually live out the threat of their filibuster. I mean, it is unconscionable the way that the Senate operates. It's fundamentally undemocratic, and it takes the President of the United States, who I believe needs to be more forceful on the filibuster. He needs to also lean, I believe, on his executive authority and say, if you're going to get in the way, we're going to find other ways to do this. And it's either you're either with us or you're not with us. But this train is moving, and we need to govern, because the United States House of Representatives is delivering an agenda for the people. We cannot blame Mitch McConnell, and we cannot blame Joe Manchin either, because we have tools at our disposal with a trifecta. And what we need to do is actually thank and prioritize the communities that elected those majorities. And that includes poor people, the working class, middle class Americans, Black Americans, immigrant communities, and more. And we have to move past a politics as usual that compromises all of those folks for a very narrow band of affluent voters. Because when elections are determined by 1 to 2 points, we cannot afford a collapse in turnout in anybody, in swing districts, in youth voters, in Black communities, period, for whatever reason. Every single community is critical right now, and we cannot allow the climate crisis to become a catastrophe, which is what is represented right now with this bill going by the wayside or being trimmed down any further. Because as I've said in the House Democratic Caucus, some of us are actually going to have to live on this planet in 50 years. And right now, what happens right now determines how bad it's going to be. And so this is real life, this is serious, and we need to govern like it.